The dog froze beside the broken fence and made a sound so raw that 6 armed officers stopped moving. It wasn't a bark, it wasn't a growl. It was the kind of cry that comes from somewhere older than training, older than commands, older than fear. Rain slid off his scarred muzzle as he stared at a patch of soaked earth, no bigger than a grave marker. His handler whispered his name once. The dog didn't blink. 17 years of dead ends were about to lean on that one silence. By the time Detective Nora Hale reached the fence, the dog was already trembling, not with panic, with effort. He pulled air through his nose in short, hard bursts, then lifted his head toward the wind as if the storm itself were trying to tell him something. Behind him, an excavator idled near the road, waiting to tear down what was left of the Granger farm by noon. If the dog was wrong, this would be one more embarrassment added to a file thick enough to stop a door. If he was right, then something had been buried here long after the searchlights faded. The farm sat at the edge of Mercer County, where the fields flattened into marsh and the nights carried the smell of wet iron. 17 years earlier, a 14-year-old girl named Abby Sloan had vanished on her bike less than 2 miles from that fence. Red raincoat, choir folder strapped to her handlebars, a cheap silver cross at her throat. She was seen at 6:12 p.m., turning off County Road 9 into a shortcut lined with soybean fields. Then nothing. No scream, no body, no witness who could hold up under questions. Just a bike found in a ditch and a mother who never stopped sleeping near the front window. The county searched everything back then. Dogs, horses, volunteers with flashlights, deputies waist-deep in creek water. They dragged the pond, opened septic tanks, kicked in barn doors, sifted old ash piles, and walked the Granger property so many times that the grass forgot how to stand. But search teams work inside the limits of weather, time, and human certainty. Rain came hard the second night. Tracks dissolved. Scents bled into mud. Tips turned rotten. Names were crossed out, then written back in, then crossed out again. The dog standing at that fence was named Bishop, Belgian Malinois, 9 years old, left ear split at the tip, white scar running from jaw to neck, where shrapnel had once kissed him and kept going. He had spent 6 years overseas with the Army, finding explosives no one else could see and sleeping beside men who learned to trust his nose more than their own eyes. When the military retired him, they wrote one clean line in his file: useful, reactive, keep with experienced handler. That was the polite version of saying war had stayed inside him. His handler, Deputy Cole Mercer, understood that better than most. He had worked military kennels before trading desert heat for county roads and domestic warrants. Cole never talked much, and Bishop didn't need him to. Their bond lived in the small things: 2 fingers against a leash clip, a glance instead of a command. The way Bishop always checked over his shoulder after an alert, not for permission, but for recognition, as if he needed one human in the world to admit he wasn't imagining what he smelled. That morning, before the team rolled out to the farm, Abby's mother met them outside the sheriff's office. Marin Sloan had the kind of tired that settles into bone and never leaves. Her coat was buttoned wrong. One hand clutched Abby's old choir photograph, the edges gone soft from years of being handled. She didn't ask Cole whether the dog would find her daughter. People waiting 17 years don't waste breath on promises. She just crouched slowly, held out her hand, and Bishop, this battered animal who trusted almost no strangers, pressed his head into her palm and stood there like he already knew why she shook. That was the part Detective Hale didn't like. Not the dog. The hope. Hope made families hear certainty where there was none, and the Abby Sloan case had already eaten too many good intentions. She told the team this was a demolition sweep, nothing more. One pass through the structures. One look at the creek bed before heavy equipment moved in. No headlines, no speeches. The deputies nodded. Bishop was led to the old farmhouse porch, where every prior search had begun. But Bishop didn't even look at the house. He turned straight toward the wind. He moved across the yard with that low, rolling gait working dogs get when they're half instinct, half machine. Past the rusted swing set, past the collapsed chicken run, past the stone well cap officers had tapped and photographed a dozen times over the years. Rain misted the fields and brought up the smell of diesel from an old generator shed. Cole let the leash go loose. Bishop cut left, stopped at the creek bank, sniffed a tangle of roots, then rejected it. A rabbit bolted from weeds. He ignored it. A deputy coughed near the barn. Bishop never even twitched. He was sorting layers no human being could sense. The first break came at the smokehouse, a squat brick box leaning into the weather like it was tired of standing. Bishop circled once, twice, then jammed his nose beneath the cracked drain lip and clawed hard enough to rip 2 nails bloody. Cole dropped to his knees. Mud soaked through his jeans as he reached under the lip and pulled free a clotted wad of leaves, soot, and something red. At first it looked like trash. Then Detective Hale rinsed it with water from her bottle. A bead, small, plastic, cherry red. Marin Sloan had once described the bracelet Abby wore the week she vanished. Homemade, red beads, 1 white angel charm. No one spoke for a few seconds. The rain did all the talking. Then Hale ordered the site taped off, and the yard that had felt dead a minute earlier snapped awake. Evidence bags, photos, radio chatter. One deputy started swearing under his breath because he had worked the original case as a rookie and knew exactly what that bead meant. Not proof of murder, not yet, but proof that Abby had been here, on this property, in this ground everyone had walked. And Bishop still wasn't done. He yanked free the moment Cole stood up, not wild, urgent. He dragged them behind the smokehouse to a strip of earth between the generator shed and the fence line, then stopped so suddenly Cole nearly stumbled over him. The dog sniffed the air above the mud, not the mud itself, and began to pace in a tight box, back and forth, back and forth. Cole watched his breathing change. This was not live scent, not fresh disturbance either. It was older, trapped, rising in threads every time the rain warmed the rotten wood around them. The strange thing was, Bishop kept glancing at the fence post, then away from it, like the real source was close, but not there. Hale crouched by the post and scraped at the base with her knife. Solid cedar, soft with age, but intact. Nothing obvious. One of the deputies muttered that the dog was cueing off the bead. Another said the original cadaver team would have found anything major near the structures. Cole heard them, but he trusted the dog's body more than their words. Bishop's shoulders stayed locked toward the shed, where an old diesel generator sat under a warped sheet metal roof. It had been searched, logged, cleared. Still, Bishop flattened himself and stared at it so hard the muscles in his neck started to jump. He knew something. They pried open the generator housing and were hit with old fuel, wet rust, and the sour smell of trapped years. Rat nests filled one corner. A deputy gagged. Bishop shoved forward, nose working through the fumes, and struck again at a narrow seam along the back panel. Not bark, not scratch. Just one violent jab of his muzzle, then a sharp look at Cole. The panel was unscrewed. Behind it sat a cavity no one had documented before, blackened with grease. Cole reached in and pulled out a strip of red fabric, twisted around a rusted zipper pull. The cloth was tiny, burned at one end, but Abby's mother had told them, years ago, that the raincoat she vanished in had a brass zipper with a missing tab. That should have been enough to stop every skeptic on the property. It wasn't, because old farms collect old junk, and good defense attorneys live off reasonable doubt. Hale knew they needed a chain that led somewhere solid, something tied to a person, something a jury could feel in their hands. Yet Bishop kept drawing them away from the fines, away from the shed, away from the house, toward the line where the property met the marsh. That was the one area old search notes treated as a formality. Too wet, too shallow, too exposed. People assumed no one would hide anything there. People assume a lot when they want a case to make sense. By noon the storm got heavier. Water drummed on barn tin and turned the yard slick as soap. Bishop moved slower now, not from fatigue, but concentration. He tested the breeze, doubled back, then stopped near a cluster of blackberry canes so thick they had swallowed an old stone ring almost completely from view. Cole hacked the thorns back with a shovel. Underneath was a narrow shaft, half filled with leaves and silt. An old cistern, maybe. Maybe a dry well. Records called it non-essential structure. Bishop lay flat at its edge and pushed his nose into the opening. then whined low in his throat until the sound turned every spine around him to wire. They lowered a camera first. Mud, brick, standing water, maybe 3 feet down. Then something pale where pale should not be. Hale went silent. The fire department rigged a safer line. A deputy descended with gloves and a recovery bag. When he came up, he was holding a child's sneaker, waterlogged but intact enough to show a faded blue stripe along the side. Maren Sloan had spent years telling anyone who would listen that Abby wore one blue sneaker and one black one the night she vanished, because the black pair had split at the sole. Detectives once treated that detail like grief talking. It wasn't. The mother had remembered correctly. The file had not. Now the whole property changed shape. Deputies stopped walking casually. No one leaned on vehicles. The excavator shut down. Even the rain sounded different, like it was falling into a place that finally mattered. Hale called for the state lab and a forensic anthropologist. Cole knelt beside Bishop and rubbed the wet fur at the base of his neck. The dog was panting hard, but not from exertion, from pressure, from the strain of holding onto a trail that had waited in silence longer than some marriages last. He had given them Abby's presence. He had given them the first real break in 17 years. And still he kept looking back toward that fence. Here's the question that hung over everyone then. If you had spent 17 years being told a case was cold, if maps and search logs and seasoned investigators all said the important ground had already been covered, would you have trusted the dog enough to keep tearing the place apart? Or would you have settled for what you had and called it closure? I want you to sit with that, because this next choice changed everything. Hale almost called it. She had enough for a major recovery scene, enough to reopen every suspect interview, enough to tell Abby's mother, with care and caution, that her daughter had not simply run away. But Bishop rose before she could speak and pulled so sharply that Cole had to brace both boots in the mud. The dog went straight past the cistern, past the generator shed, and back to the broken fence where this day had started. Same post, same patch of earth. Except now he wasn't staring at the ground. He was staring 3 feet higher, right into the split seam of the cedar. Cole stepped closer. Rainwater ran down the post and into a crack no wider than his thumb. He pressed a light against it and saw darkness deeper than solid wood should allow. Hollow. The entire post was hollow. Not naturally. Cleaned out. Capped years ago with a rusted metal sleeve half hidden by lichen. Hale cursed once, low and furious, because that fence line had been photographed in the original search, but never dismantled. Who dismantles fence posts during a missing person search when there are ponds, barns, fields, and rumors to chase? No one. No one except the dog who wouldn't let it go. They cut the sleeve free with a reciprocating saw from the patrol truck. Metal screamed through the rain. Bishop began to bark then, finally bark, each strike of sound aimed at the wood as if time itself were inside it and needed breaking open. When the sleeve fell away, Cole smelled it before he saw it. Not rot, not animal. Something stale and trapped beneath grease and cedar oil. He reached into the cavity with gloved fingers and touched waxed cloth packed tight with axle grease. Whoever hid it had wanted dogs, water, heat, and years to fail. For 17 years, that almost worked. The bundle came out slowly, too slowly, the kind of slow that makes every heartbeat feel loud. Hale held the evidence bag open, but Cole didn't let go right away. The cloth was tied with nylon cord stiffened by age. Bishop stood pressed against his leg, shaking so hard his tags clicked against the leash clasp. Cole cut the cord, folded back one greasy layer, then another, and there, inside the dark, wrapped like something precious or cursed, was a little silver cross necklace, blackened with time. Abby Sloan had worn one in every school picture her mother ever showed the department. Under the necklace sat a second object, rectangular, plastic, smaller than a wallet. Maren Sloan's hand flew to her mouth before anyone even named it. A microcassette recorder. Abby used one for choir rehearsals because she loved hearing whether she was sharp on the high notes. She had begged for that recorder for Christmas and carried it everywhere for a month, her mother once said. The department wrote that detail down, then lost it in the flood of other details that follow a vanished child. The recorder had been missing all 17 years, hidden inside a fence post people leaned against during search breaks. For a moment, the yard went still in that awful way it does before reality catches up. Hale took the recorder like it might shatter from breath alone. One deputy turned away and wiped his eyes with a muddy wrist. Another looked straight at Bishop, no sarcasm left in him, like he was trying to understand what kind of creature can reach through diesel fumes, rain-soaked cedar, old grease, and the indifference of time to pull truth back into daylight. Cole pressed his forehead to Bishop's for 1 second. Just one. The dog exhaled and went quiet. The lab team rushed the recorder under emergency preservation. Everyone expected corrosion, dead tape, silence. They got 23 seconds. 23 broken seconds of Abby's voice, close and clear enough to rip the air out of the room. She was laughing first. Wind in the background. Bicycle chain clicking. Then her voice changed. "Mr. Dillard? My mom's waiting." A truck door, a scrape, her breath catching hard, and a man saying, "It'll take a minute." Ray Dillard, farm caretaker, volunteer searcher. The same man who stood beside cameras 17 years earlier asking for prayers. When Hale heard it, she closed her eyes like someone had struck her. Ray Dillard was 74 now, living 2 counties over, still insisting Abby had probably met the wrong stranger on the highway. He had never been charged because nothing tied him to the girl beyond proximity and bad instincts. Now there was the recorder, the property, the concealed items, the sneaker, the cistern, and on the nylon cord around the waxed bundle, preserved beneath the grease, the lab would later lift a partial print consistent with Ray's right thumb. Not magic, not myth, just a chain at last, forged by a dog who refused the version of the world written by men. If Bishop's loyalty just hit you in the chest, hit that like button right now. Not for the algorithm, for Abby. For every name that sits too long in a file cabinet until people start talking about it like weather. Some stories deserve to be carried farther than the county line that tried to bury them. The arrest happened before sunrise the next day. Ray opened his door in slippers, saw Hale on the porch, and knew. That was the strangest part, she said later. Not surprise, not outrage. Just a slackness in his face, as if he had been living with a locked room inside him for so long that hearing the key turn almost brought relief. He denied it once. Then the recorder was played. Then Abby's cross was placed in a clear bag on the table between them. Ray's shoulders folded. Men who hide evil for years still break in ordinary ways. Abby's remains were recovered from the cistern wall cavity over the next 2 days, tucked behind loose brick and sealed with rubble. The original search camera had looked downward through murky water and never caught the recess along the side. The shoe had shifted free only after storms and frost worked the bricks apart over time. Searchers had missed it. Detectives had missed it. The farm had nearly been demolished over it. Bishop had not missed it. He had smelled a life interrupted and a lie preserved. When Maren Sloan was told they had found her daughter and found the man who took her, she didn't collapse. She didn't scream. She sat very still in the sheriff's office chair, holding Abby's silver cross in both hands while tears ran soundlessly down her face. Bishop walked over without being called and rested his head on her knee again, the same way he had the morning before. She stroked the scar along his neck and whispered, "You brought her home." Cole looked away then, because some moments are too sacred to witness straight on. At sentencing, Hale read from the old search logs. Rain conditions severe. Scent compromised. Negative results at fence line. She read those words so the court could hear how easily truth gets buried under paperwork. Then she played the restored 23 seconds. Abby's voice filled the room one last time, young and alive and trusting for just a beat too long. Ray Dillard never looked up. Maren did. So did Cole. So did everyone who had ever doubted what a dog might know. Bishop never understood courtrooms or headlines or why strangers started calling him a hero. He understood Cole's hand on his shoulder. He understood Maren's scent changing from raw grief to something softer, not healed, never healed, but steadier. He understood that the pressure he had carried at that fence was finally gone. A week later, When the county held a small ceremony under gray skies, Bishop stood restless through the applause and only settled when Marin clipped Abby's silver cross, now cleaned and repaired, onto the ribbon hanging from his collar. That was the only medal he seemed to care about. So when you think about this story, don't think first about the evidence bag or the tape or the arrest. Think about a scarred dog in the rain, refusing to walk away from a fence post everyone else thought was empty. Think about the patience of that nose, the stubbornness of that heart, and think about how many truths survive only because someone, human or animal, decides that silence is not the same thing as peace. If you believe heroes can have 4 legs and a scarred muzzle, subscribe. There's another story coming soon about a service dog who stayed beside one soldier through the darkest night of his life. You do not want to miss that one.